Okay, think about this for a second. By 2020, they were projecting, 80% of Christians worldwide would be in the global south, Africa, Asia, Latin America.
Yeah, it's staggering when you compare it to, say, 1900. Africa had only like 9 million Christians back then.
Exactly. And now there are projections, maybe even 1 billion Christians in Africa alone by 2025. It's just a massive shift.
It really is. And it's not just about the numbers, right? It signals a huge transformation in, well, how Christian mission and leadership are understood and practiced.
So in this deep dive, we're digging into perspectives coming straight from this majority world.
Right. We've got this collection of essays, and they offer some pretty sharp self-criticism, actually. Plus, new ideas about partnerships, engaging other faiths.
And how Christians fit into, building their nations.
Yeah, and you'll see there's quite a diversity of viewpoints in the sources we're looking at. Not monolithic at all.
For sure. And for you, the learner, our mission here is to give you a solid but, clear grasp of these key trends and, frankly, the challenges.
We want to pull out some insights that might, well, surprise you, maybe challenge some of those older Western-centric views of Christianity.
Get ready for some aha moments, hopefully, as we unpack this stuff without getting totally bogged down.
Sounds good. So where should we start? Maybe with that self-critique within African Christian leadership.
Yeah, let's do that. Peter Trantel's essay, he really goes there, doesn't he? Looking hard at the deficits he perceives.
He does. And he sets up this paradox. You've got this incredible, unprecedented church growth across Africa.
But at the same time, these massive, persistent problems are still there. HIV/AIDS, poverty, corruption, political violence, violence against women and children. It's heartbreaking.
And Tarantel basically says, look, this coexistence points to a failure in leadership. He argues leaders have a responsibility, an ethical duty, to tackle these societal issues.
It really makes you think of Archbishop Tutu's cry, oh, Africa, Africa, where are your leaders? That captures such a deep feeling, doesn't it?
It really does, a longing for that kind of effective ethical leadership.
Now, it's not all critique, obviously. The sources do highlight really significant positive examples, too.
Oh, absolutely. People like Nelson Mandela, Kenneth Kaunda, Kwame Nkrumah, Haile Selassie, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, leaders who made a massive impact.
Definitely. But there's also this warning note, isn't there, from the African Bible Commentary contributor?
Yeah, that's crucial. The argument is this rapid growth needs depth, not just breadth. There's a danger of becoming a credulous church.
Meaning,
easily swayed by teachings that are maybe superficial, lacking the deep roots needed to really transform society. They're calling for leaders with real prophetic insight.
It connects, in a way, to Thabo Mbeki's I Am an African speech. That powerful assertion of identity and belonging feels really central here.
Precisely. And building on identity, the sources talk a lot about cultural intelligence, CQ.
Right, CQ. So that's about being effective across different cultures.
Yeah, basically. Understanding your own culture, understanding others, adapting. The argument is that the biggest leadership challenges aren't usually technical skills, they're these cultural miscommunications, differing norms.
And those norms can be really different, like the African concept of Ubuntu.
Umuntu kama Ubuntu. A person is a person through other human beings.
That must shape leadership massively, right? Prioritizing the community over just the individual. It's quite different from many Western models.
Totally. Even things like leadership seminars, often designed with Western individualism baked in, might not fully land. Mandela himself talked about how tribal meetings with that collective voice shaped him.
Interesting. And it relates to communication styles too, doesn't it?
It does. The sources note a tendency towards more deferential, maybe indirect communication in many African contexts.
But in global setting.
In global settings, the ability to be more direct, more confident, without needing the other person to kind of read between the lines becomes really important for effective leadership.
This whole discussion, leadership, culture, it makes you think about global power dynamics. Kishore Mahbubani's point about the West.
Right. How the West, maybe 12% of the world's population, still holds disproportionate power in places like the UN Security Council, the IMF, the World Bank.
So the question becomes, does that same imbalance exist in the church world, even with all the numbers shifting south?
It's a critical question. And it ties into what President Obama said, didn't he? About the U.S. needing to be a partner to Africa, not a patron.
Yeah, that sentiment feels key for understanding mission and leadership moving forward.
Definitely.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. What about the relationship between the church itself and its mission? How that's understood in different contexts?
Well, Nikobata argues really strongly against, separating things out. You can't
Hmm.
just hive off cultural, social, political, economic realities from how you understand the church and its mission.
They're all interwoven.
Exactly. It's holistic.
Yeah.
And you see a similar vibe in Moses Parmar's work on mission in India, specifically regarding Hindu traditions.
He points out some major hurdles there, right?
Yeah, several. The rise of Hindu fundamentalism, groups like the RSS, the BJP gaining political influence. That's one big factor.
That sheer complexity of languages.
Oh, absolutely. You've got multiple official state languages, then hundreds, maybe thousands of local languages. It's a huge communication challenge.
And he also suggested, maybe, delicately, that some missionary approaches or mindsets might have been part of the problem.
He does suggest that, yes. Which leads him to call for contextual gospel presentation, avoiding aggressive confrontational methods, being really sensitive to the local culture.
Empowering local believers seems key in his view. They understand their own people best.
Absolutely. That's the core of contextualization, isn't it? Recognizing that local believers know the needs, know the nuances. And it's also about learning from other cultures, seeing how God's truth might be reflected there too.
Like that example from Judges, Judah seeking local help.
Exactly. It shows the wisdom of partnership, of understanding the local context, acknowledging that those within a culture often hold the key.
Which leads us nicely into partnerships in this. What did Patrick Fung call it? A polycentric world.
Yeah, polycentric, multiple centers. Fung argues that mission partnerships can't just be defined from, an American or European viewpoint anymore.
Because the centers of Christianity are shifting.
Right. And he uses this beautiful image of the Trinity perichoresis. It means dancing together, like a mutual indwelling and sharing within the Godhead.
So that's the model for mission partnerships, multi-directional sharing.
That's the idea. Unity flowing from God, fostering unity among believers. It forces us to redefine who we are in global mission.
Moving beyond that old sense of Western dominance.
And rethinking things like tent-making ministry people supporting themselves while doing mission work. How does that fit into this new global partnership model?
The ultimate goal being
Developing Christ-like leaders everywhere. Fung sees this new global reality as a huge opportunity for real partnership, and maybe even rediscovering the supernatural dimension of mission, which he thinks sometimes got lost in Western approaches.
Andrew Walls's idea of polycentrism fits right in here too, doesn't it? The riches of 100 places learning from each other.
It does. That sense of interconnectedness, mutual learning between Christian centers globally.
But there's still a but, isn't there? The sources acknowledge the power imbalance.
Oh, definitely. The historical reality is that even with the numbers shifting, the centers of power, institutions, funding, structures, personnel are still largely based in the global north.
And Young critiques that, right, and suggests it might even lead to a lack of self-confidence among some global south leaders.
Yeah, this lingering sense of perhaps Western superiority, even if unintended.
It makes Samuel Escobar's critique of managerial missiology seem really relevant.
Absolutely. Avoiding those overly bureaucratic top-down approaches. He and Bosch remind us the New Testament itself is a missionary text, full of diverse mission theologies.
The emphasis being less on rigid definitions and more on the missionary existence of all believers.
Right. And seeing mission as the church with others, moving away from those colonial vibes, the local church becomes central.
So no more hierarchy where global North churches are automatically seen as like the senior partners.
That's the push. And a call for global South churches to critically examine Western interpretations they might have inherited and really develop their own context-based approaches.
Okay, turning now to engagement with other major faiths. Islam comes up quite a bit.
Yes, MLH and GF discuss Islam's nature. They stress it's not just another religion in the Western sense, but a whole way of life. A system encompassing social and political aspects, too.
And they highlight a core goal within Islam.
The ultimate submission of all people to Allah, yes. And they outline various strategies used to advance this in places like Africa, dawah, imitation, jihad, building relationships through commerce, education, health services.
Politics, marriage, aid, building mosques. It's multi-pronged.
Very much so. They also mention the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the OIC, aiming to unify the global Muslim community.
And we see diverse manifestations like the Hizmet schools globally, but also militant groups like Al-Shabaab or Boko Haram.
Right. Then the focus shifts to the pressures on Christian communities, particularly in the Middle East and North Africa, the MENA region.
It sounds pretty tough. Declining numbers in Turkey, Lebanon, constant scrutiny in Egypt.
Tragic situations like Southern Sudan, lack of religious freedom elsewhere, targeting by groups like ISIL. It's a grim picture in many places.
And historically,
The sources point to a past often marked by conflict, and perhaps limited efforts from the Christian side to really share the message of grace proactively with Muslim neighbors.
there's also tension mentioned around Sharia law in non-Muslim majority places.
Yes, and reports of extremist views calling for the elimination of non-Muslims, which is deeply concerning.
And for converts from Islam.
Huge challenges, social ostracization, being cut off by family, even issues around burial. It's a high cost.
But it's not all negative. The sources also talk about a growing Arab Christian presence.
Yes, both globally and within the Middle East, highlighting their historical role in multicultural societies and, importantly, distinguishing between Arab ethnicity and Muslim religious identity. They're not the same thing.
And there's research suggesting quite surprising numbers of Muslims turning to Christ.
David Garrison's work, yeah. He documents significant movements. And historically, there are precedents. John at Damascus engaging critically early on, figures like Sheikh Mansour or Narain Vamantilak representing movements towards Christianity.
So the takeaway seems to be the need for both theological dialogue and mission.
Absolutely. And a recommitment to sharing the gospel. The authors suggest practical steps too, like Asian churches learning Arabic and other relevant languages, creating scholars of Islam, setting up research centers.
Okay, that leads us into another major theme, the role Christians play, or should play, in nation building, especially in the global south. Gideon Paramalam explores this.
Right. He defines nation building as creating those shared values, symbols, memories, traditions, something that needs everyone, all citizens involved.
And he finds a theological basis for it.
Yeah, in Acts 17, where Paul talks about God setting boundaries for nations. But Paramalam is also very clear about the huge hindrances in Africa.
Like tribalism, conflict, injustice.
Poor governance, corruption, poverty. He quotes Chinua Achebe on compromised institutions, which really paints a picture of the challenge.
Ineffective leadership and corruption just keep coming up as major roadblocks.
They do, along with interreligious intolerance. Paramalam really stresses education's vital role, quoting someone saying, when education collapses, the nation collapses.
And justice is key for peace, right? That idea of just peacemaking.
Exactly. Peace needs that foundation of justice. And while Romans 13 calls for respecting authority, there's also the prophetic duty to challenge injustice.
We see historical examples of Christians as nation builders, don't we?
For sure. William Carey in India, education, translation work. Early missionaries in Africa, building schools, colleges, huge contributions.
Paramalam sees a spiritual dimension, too. Christians as agents of God's kingdom now.
Yes, referencing Jeremiah 29:7, seek the welfare of the city. He argues discipleship includes nation building. It's about living out values like compassion, love, social responsibility.
And the church has a prophetic role.
To speak out against moral decay in all spheres, political, social, economic, and to work for the common good, drawing on thinkers throughout history.
He also mentions tapping into that African spirit of collective humanity for global citizenship.
Right. And Ruben Das brings in the humanitarian aspect, arguing it needs to be integrated into mission theology, especially crucial in the majority world where poverty is lived reality.
He looks at different responses like liberation theology and Pentecostalism.
And highlights the unique position of Christian humanitarian groups to show Christ's love practically, as the local church is often deeply embedded in the social fabric.
So let's zoom out again. Ha Young analyzes this whole global shift, the issues, the challenges.
He contrasts the perceived decline in Western Christianity with the boom in the majority world.
And points out a key challenge. Western theological frameworks don't always fit, do they?
Often not perfectly. They might not adequately address majority worldviews, intellectual questions, experiences of the supernatural.
Like different views on ancestor veneration or the Holy Spirit's work?
Exactly. Charles Kraft even talked about a powerless Enlightenment Christianity being exported sometimes.
But there's also a challenge within the growing majority world churches, right? Shallow discipleship.
Yes, that's a serious concern. Nominalism. He points to examples like South Korea's rapid growth, followed by challenges, or even the Rwandan genocide happening in a heavily Christianized nation. The need is to draw on deeper historical traditions of spiritual formation.
He also tackles the legacy of Western missions. It's complex.
Very. You have accusations of cultural destruction, but then Robert Woodbury's research shows significant positive impacts, preserving languages, contributing to social progress. It pushes back against a simple Western guilt complex.
And interestingly, some non-Christian Chinese intellectuals actually view Christian values positively for their nation.
Yeah, as a potential foundation. Why Young stresses the need for a theology of nation building for these emerging nations.
It needs a multi-level Christian approach, he argues. Revival and conversion are vital, but maybe not the whole picture for social transformation.
Right. He acknowledges the social lift Pentecostalism often brings to the poor, but also stresses character formation, tackling corruption, echoing Wesley's focus on holiness.
And reconciliation is huge. Post-apartheid South Africa, the TRC.
A powerful example. And recognizing the Christian roots of many Western liberal ideas, urging majority world Christians to engage thinkers in their own contexts on these themes.
Finally, let's touch on discipleship itself. David Ruiz takes a fresh look at the Great Commission.
Yeah, Matthew 28, he argues the absolute core command is make disciples.
Oh.
Everything else flows from that.
Which involves baptism and teaching obedience to all of Jesus' commands.
Right, and he emphasizes faith's universality. Think of the Roman centurion Jesus praised. The goal is making the gospel available everywhere, to everyone.
And discipleship isn't just for the professionals, the leaders.
Not at all. Yeah. Acts 8.4, the scattered believers preaching everywhere. It's for every Christian. But it demands radical transformation, taking up your cross, following Jesus.
It's costly, following Jesus' own path.
Exactly. And Ruiz critiques some modern church trends, maybe prioritizing feelings or marketing over that deep, costly discipleship. He sees an urgent need, especially maybe in Latin America, to return to the Bible's foundation for the church.
He also brings up rethinking concepts like unreached peoples in our globalized world.
Yeah, with diaspora missions becoming so important. He mentions the Filipino model, believers supporting themselves abroad while actively sharing their faith.
Okay, so wrapping this deep dive up, wow, a lot covered, but some key things really stand out, don't they?
Definitely. That undeniable shift in Christianity's center of gravity.
Yeah.
And crucially, the self-reflection and new visions for leadership emerging from the majority world itself.
Yeah, that courage to self-critique. Plus, we explored the complexities of partnerships now, engaging with other faiths like Islam.
And that vital role of Christians in nation building, all stemming back to that core call of making disciples. The sheer range of perspectives is striking. It's a faith in dynamic motion.
Absolutely. Which leaves us, and you the learner, with a pretty big question to ponder, I think. As Christianity's heartland continues this dramatic shift, how does really understanding these majority world perspectives change your own view of faith, leadership, and engagement? What might that mean for how we collaborate, how the gospel spreads and takes root around the world in the future? Something to think about.